In 1915, a pilot leaned out of an open cockpit and fired a pistol at another aircraft flying beside him, because nobody had yet figured out how to mount a machine gun without shooting off your own propeller. A little over a century later, aircraft are being designed that may not need a pilot in the cockpit at all. This is the complete, unbroken story of how the fighter jet was built. One aircraft, one war, and one impossible problem solved at a time. The story begins with a problem nobody could solve. Early WW-1 aircraft were unarmed observation platforms, used almost exclusively to spot enemy troop movements and artillery positions from above. When pilots began carrying pistols and rifles, specifically to shoot at each other during these reconnaissance flights, they discovered an obvious mechanical flaw. A machine gun mounted on the nose, the only sensible firing position, would shred your own propeller blades with every burst fired directly through the spinning arc. Several early aircraft designers attempted awkward workarounds, mounting guns on the upper wing to fire over the propeller entirely, but these positions made reloading and aiming extraordinarily difficult in flight. In 1915, Dutch engineer Anthony Fokker solved the problem elegantly with the Fokker Eindecker, developing a synchronization gear that mechanically timed the machine gun's firing sequence to pass precisely between the spinning propeller blades every single rotation. It seems almost obvious in hindsight. At the time, it was so devastating an advantage that German pilots dominated Allied reconnaissance aircraft so completely and so quickly that the period became grimly known among Allied airmen as the Fokker Scourge, and the entire concept of the dedicated fighter aircraft, a machine built specifically and exclusively to destroy other machines in the air, was born from a single mechanical timing solution. The Allies answered 2 years later with the Sopwith Camel, arguably the single most iconic aircraft of the entire war and the fighter most associated with the era in popular memory. Its twin synchronized machine guns and famously unstable, twitchy handling characteristics made it genuinely lethal in the hands of a skilled, experienced pilot and a serious death trap for an untrained novice. The aircraft's powerful rotary engine, where the entire engine block spun with the propeller rather than remaining fixed, created strong gyroscopic forces that made right-hand turns startlingly fast and tight, while left-hand turns became dangerously sluggish and wide, a quirk that experienced pilots quickly learned to exploit tactically against opponents who hadn't yet mastered the aircraft's unusual handling. Camel pilots were officially credited with destroying more enemy aircraft than any other single Allied fighter type of the entire war, including a notable role in the engagement that ultimately brought down the legendary German ace Manfred von Richthofen, the Red Baron, in April 1918. For nearly 2 decades after World War I concluded, fighter design remained essentially locked within the biplane era. Fabric-covered wooden frames, fully open cockpits exposing pilots directly to the elements, and fixed non-retractable landing gear that created significant aerodynamic drag. That era changed permanently and irreversibly with the Messerschmitt Bf 109, introduced in 1935 as Nazi Germany secretly rebuilt its air force in direct violation of the disarmament terms established by the Treaty of Versailles. The 109 was a genuine monoplane with a fully enclosed cockpit, retractable landing gear that folded away in flight, and all-metal semi-monocoque construction, a design so far ahead of contemporary biplane fighters still in service elsewhere that it rendered an entire generation of existing aircraft designs instantly and completely obsolete overnight. Over 34,000 individual units were built across the course of the war, making it the single most produced fighter aircraft in human history, a production record that has never been broken by any subsequent design, and almost certainly never will be given how dramatically manufacturing costs have since increased. Britain's direct answer arrived in 1938. The Supermarine Spitfire, whose distinctive elliptical wing shape provided exceptional maneuverability and a remarkably low stall speed at high combat speeds. During the Battle of Britain in the summer of 1940, the Spitfire became the aircraft that captured the entire world's imagination, engaging German Messerschmitts directly in the skies over southern England in a sustained aerial battle that ultimately determined whether Nazi Germany would successfully invade the British Isles. The technological duel between the Bf 109 and the Spitfire, two monoplane fighters of remarkably similar overall performance characteristics, built by two industrial nations fighting quite literally for their national survival, came to define the entire propeller-driven era of fighter combat that followed. Then, in 1944, everything in aerial warfare changed again, fundamentally and permanently. Germany fielded the Messerschmitt Me 262, the world's first genuinely operational jet-powered fighter aircraft to enter combat service. It could fly nearly 100 miles per hour faster than the very best Allied propeller-driven fighters of the period, so dramatically fast that Allied pilots initially struggled for months to develop any reliable combat tactic that worked against it beyond simply catching it on the ground during its vulnerable takeoff and landing phases, when its early jet engines produced dangerously little available thrust for evasive maneuvering. Germany ultimately built the aircraft too late in the war, and in far too few numbers to meaningfully change its eventual outcome. But the Me 262 proved conclusively and permanently that the propeller-driven fighter era was over. Britain's own Gloster Meteor entered operational service that same year, becoming the only Allied jet aircraft to see any combat action during World War II, though it was used primarily to intercept German V-1 flying bombs rather than to engage directly in traditional aerial dogfighting against enemy aircraft. The jet age reached its full combat maturity during the Korean War. The Soviet-built MiG-15, featuring genuinely swept wings and a remarkably powerful engine derived partly from captured German wartime research, stunned American pilots when it first appeared unexpectedly in Korean skies in late 1950. It could consistently outclimb and outturn absolutely anything the United States had available in the entire theater at that point. America's rushed response, the F-86 Sabre, arrived shortly afterward with its own swept-wing aerodynamic design and notably superior gun sight targeting technology. And the two aircraft subsequently fought the first sustained jet versus jet air combat campaign in military history. American pilots ultimately claimed a significantly favorable overall kill ratio against the MiG-15 throughout the conflict, a result later attributed by historians less to the inherent superiority of the aircraft itself and considerably more to superior American pilot training programs and extensive combat experience directly carried over from World War II veteran instructors. The Soviet Union answered emphatically with the MiG-21 in 1959, a small, mechanically simple, and astonishingly inexpensive delta-wing interceptor that would go on to become the most produced supersonic jet aircraft in the entire history of aviation, with well over 11,000 individual units eventually built and exported to more than 60 different countries worldwide. Its deliberate simplicity was its true design genius. Virtually any Air Force on Earth, regardless of available budget or existing technical sophistication, could realistically operate and independently maintain it, making the MiG-21 the defining and most recognizable fighter aircraft of the entire developing world for the following 4 full decades of service. America's F-4 Phantom II, introduced in 1958, took the philosophically opposite design approach, a large, powerful, missile-armed interceptor originally designed and built without any internal cannon at all, based on the era's confident but ultimately flawed assumption that modern guided missiles had made close-range visual dogfighting entirely obsolete. Vietnam proved that confident assumption catastrophically and painfully wrong in practice. North Vietnamese MiG-21s repeatedly and deliberately closed to very close visual range, specifically where the gunless Phantom found itself at a severe tactical disadvantage, ultimately forcing the U.S. Navy to establish the now legendary Top Gun Fighter Weapons School, specifically to relearn fundamental dogfighting skills that had been officially abandoned as supposedly unnecessary just 1 decade earlier. That hard-learned lesson directly produced the F-14 Tomcat in 1970, famous both for its distinctive swing-wing design that could sweep fully back for high-speed intercept missions or extend forward for tight, close-range maneuverability, and for its long-range AIM-54 Phoenix missile system capable of engaging multiple targets simultaneously from over 100 miles away. It became the definitive naval fighter aircraft of the late Cold War era, and through the cultural impact of a single 1986 Hollywood film, one of the most widely and instantly recognizable military aircraft ever built in aviation history. The Air Force's parallel answer to the same era's challenges was the F-15 Eagle, entering operational service in 1976 with a design philosophy famously summarized in one memorable phrase from its chief designer: "Not a pound for air to ground." Built purely and specifically for uncompromising air superiority, with a thrust-to-weight ratio actually exceeding 1, meaning the aircraft could theoretically accelerate straight upward against gravity alone. The F-15 has never once been shot down in aerial combat across more than 5 decades of continuous service with multiple Allied air forces worldwide, an extraordinary operational combat record that absolutely no other fighter aircraft design in history has ever come close to matching. Where the F-15 was expensive, complex, and highly specialized, the F-16 Fighting Falcon, introduced in 1978, was deliberately designed from the outset to be comparatively cheap, exceptionally agile, and produced in enormous numbers as a lightweight tactical complement to the heavier Eagle. Its revolutionary fly-by-wire flight control system, onboard computers translating pilot stick inputs into control surface movements rather than direct mechanical linkage, allowed engineers to deliberately build the aircraft aerodynamically unstable for maximum possible agility, a configuration that no human pilot could physically control unaided without constant, continuous computer correction happening many times per second. Over 4,600 individual units have been built to date, and it remains in active frontline service with dozens of nations worldwide, nearly 5 full decades after its original introduction. The Soviet Union's direct answer to the American F-15 arrived in 1985. The Su-27 Flanker, a massive, powerful air superiority fighter capable of executing the famous Cobra maneuver, an aerodynamically extreme pitch-up movement that briefly presents the aircraft's entire belly to a pursuing enemy while rapidly bleeding away almost all forward airspeed. A maneuver with genuinely debatable practical tactical combat value, but undeniably impressive demonstration of raw aerodynamic engineering capability that thoroughly stunned Western defense observers when it was first publicly demonstrated at international air shows. In 1983, the world of aerial warfare quietly changed again in ways that would not become publicly known for years. The F-117 Nighthawk, developed in complete operational secrecy and officially denied by the US government for 5 full years after it had already become fully operational, was the first aircraft ever built primarily around radar-evading stealth-shaping principles rather than raw speed or maneuverability as its fundamental survival strategy. Its unusual angular, faceted external surfaces looked entirely unlike any conventional aircraft, precisely because its entire design was dictated by radar cross-section reduction mathematics rather than traditional aerodynamic efficiency considerations, proving definitively that an aircraft could become functionally invisible to the very detection systems that had defined the fundamentals of air combat for decades beforehand. Europe's collective response to dramatically rising individual development costs came through deliberate international cooperation. France's independently developed Dassault Rafale, introduced in 2001, and the jointly developed British, German, Italian, Spanish Eurofighter Typhoon, introduced in 2003, both representing what analysts termed the so-called 4.5 generation, featuring advanced modern avionics, meaningfully reduced radar signature compared to earlier designs, and genuine operational multi-role flexibility without fully committing to the complete stealth design philosophy that was already emerging as the next major technological step. That decisive next step arrived in 2005 with the F-22 Raptor, the world's first genuinely operational fifth-generation fighter aircraft, successfully combining true comprehensive stealth shaping, supercruise capability, meaning sustained supersonic flight achieved without relying on fuel-hungry afterburner, and advanced sensor fusion technology that presents the pilot with one single unified tactical picture rather than requiring manual interpretation of raw individual sensor readings. Total production was controversially capped at just 187 aircraft due to escalating program costs, and the Raptor has famously never once been exported to any foreign nation whatsoever, remaining to this day the most closely guarded and protected American fighter aircraft design in recent decades. The F-35 Lightning II, entering operational service in 2015, took a notably different overall program approach. A single common airframe developed simultaneously in 3 distinct variants for conventional runway operations, short takeoff and vertical landing capability, and dedicated carrier-based operations, subsequently adopted by over a dozen allied nations, specifically to collectively share the enormous development costs involved and create a genuinely networked international fighter force where every single aircraft shares sensor data with every other aircraft in real time. It became simultaneously the most expensive weapons development program in all of recorded human history, and, by a wide margin, the most widely exported stealth fighter aircraft design ever built by any nation. And now, 6th-generation fighter programs are already actively underway simultaneously in the United States, across Europe, and within China. Aircraft reportedly designed from their very earliest conceptual stages to operate alongside autonomous unmanned drone wingmen, incorporate genuine AI-assisted combat decision-making systems, and in some already published conceptual designs, potentially fly future missions without requiring any human pilot physically present inside the cockpit at all. The fundamental question that began back in 1915 as simply, how do we shoot forward without accidentally hitting our own spinning propeller, has become, in barely more than a single century of continuous development, the far more profound question of how much longer does a combat aircraft actually need a human being inside it at all?